Hey guys, tonight we wake up inside a Viking longhouse in the dead of winter, where the air is so cold it bites the inside of your nose and the darkness feels thick enough to lean on. You're not wrapped in a fluffy duvet or reaching for a glowing phone screen. You're blinking into smoke-stained rafters while somewhere above you, frost clings to the wooden beams like pale lace. Outside, snow presses against turf walls, and the wind drags its icy fingers along the roof. You probably won't survive this. Statistically speaking, Viking-age childhood was not exactly a wellness retreat. But for now, you're here, small and breathing, tucked beneath heavy furs that smell faintly of sheep and wood smoke. So, before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 am? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey together here on Timeless Sleep. You wake not because you want to, but because the longhouse is already stirring. There is no gentle alarm, only the low shifting of bodies and the soft complaint of timber as the wind leans hard against the walls. The longhouse is one long room, built of wooden planks and packed earth, with a roof layered in turf that traps heat like a living blanket. In winter, that roof is your best friend. Snow piles thickly on top, adding insulation, and if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the muffled hush it casts over the world. The only light comes from the central hearth, a long strip of fire running down the middle of the hall, its smoke escaping through a narrow opening above. Sometimes the smoke doesn't quite find its way out, and your eyes sting as you squint through the haze. You've grown used to it. Everyone has. Archaeologists centuries from now will find these longhouses across Scandinavia and Iceland, their outlines etched into the soil, proof that entire families once lived shoulder to shoulder with their animals in a single shared space. Cozy is one word for it. A bit cramped might be another. You roll onto your side and feel the warmth of your little brother pressed against your back. Privacy is a fantasy here. At night, your family sleeps along the walls on raised wooden benches layered with straw and furs. The animals, goats mostly, sometimes a sheep or two, are housed at one end of the building in winter, their body heat contributing to the collective survival strategy. It's less of a charming farm aesthetic and more of a please don't freeze arrangement. You catch the faint scent of livestock and try not to think about it too hard. At least they're quiet this morning, save for a soft bleat and the shuffle of hooves against packed earth. Your mother is already up. You can tell by the rhythm of her steps and the low murmur of her voice as she feeds the fire, adding another log and coaxing the embers back into a steady glow. In Viking households, women often held significant authority within the home, managing resources and overseeing daily life while the men travelled or worked outside. You watch her silhouette move through smoke and shadow, a strong shape against the flickering light. She pulls her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders, her breath visible in the chilly air. Even indoors, winter has its say. You sit up slowly, pushing aside the fur. The cold rushes at you instantly, nipping at your fingers and cheeks. Your tunic, coarse wool, hand-woven by someone in this very house, waits folded at the foot of your sleeping space. Wool is everything in winter. It keeps warmth even when damp, which is lucky, because everything is at least a little damp. Linen underlayers, if you're fortunate enough to have them, sit against your skin, slightly stiff from the cold. You dress quickly, clumsy fingers fumbling with ties, because lingering half covered in this temperature is a mistake you only make once. Across the hall, your father clears his throat, a deep rumble that seems to vibrate through the floorboards. He's been home all winter. The sea is no place for ships when ice rims the fjords. Viking ships, sleek longships with shallow drafts, are pulled ashore during the harshest months, turned upside down or secured carefully until spring. For now there are no raids, no trade voyages to distant lands like England or the rivers of the East. Winter is for endurance. Winter is for repair. You study the calluses on your father's hands as he flexes his fingers near the fire, as if already thinking ahead to the work the day will demand. A draught slips through the doorway, and you glance toward it instinctively. The door is thick wood, reinforced with iron, but winter finds its way in regardless. Outside, the sky is still a deep indigo. In these northern latitudes, daylight in midwinter is brief and precious. Some days feel like a long twilight stretched thin across the hours. You'll learn to measure time not by clocks, but by the slow arc of pale light across the snow. You shuffle closer to the hearth, holding your hands out to the flames. The fire pops softly, sending up sparks that swirl toward the smoke hole above. You imagine them escaping into the frozen sky like tiny spirits. The Vikings believe the world is threaded with unseen forces, gods who watch from Asgard, spirits that dwell in rocks and trees. You've been warned not to mock the hidden folk, the Landvatir, who guard the land. Best to stay polite. It costs nothing to whisper a small greeting into the cold. A wooden bowl is pressed into your hands, not yet filled, just a quiet promise of warmth to come. You cradle it anyway, savouring the heat seeping into your palms. Around you the household continues to rise. An older cousin yawns dramatically, earning a playful nudge. Someone mutters about the cold. You suppress a grin. Complaining about winter in Scandinavia is like complaining about water being wet. It's a bold strategy. You glance toward the animal end of the longhouse again. A goat meets your eyes with an expression that suggests she knows something you don't. Goats are stubborn, resilient creatures, and they matter deeply here. Their milk, even in reduced winter quantities, helps sustain the family. In some Norse myths, the god Thor rides in a chariot pulled by goats, which he can eat and then resurrect, bones unbroken. You look at your goat and decide she'd probably prefer not to participate in divine recycling. The firelight strengthens, pushing back the last of the darkness inside. Outside, dawn is beginning its slow ascent, a faint silver glow seeping over the horizon. You know that beyond these walls lies a landscape both beautiful and brutal, snow-blanketed fields, frozen streams, forests standing silent under heavy drifts. Travel is difficult now. Paths disappear. Ice forms treacherous skins over water. Survival depends on preparation done months ago. Hay stored, grain dried, meat salted or smoked. A single mistake in autumn echoes loudly in winter. You shift on your feet, feeling the packed earth floor beneath your boots. The day hasn't properly begun yet, but already you sense its weight. As a Viking child, you are not sheltered from responsibility. Childhood here is shorter, sharper. By the time you are barely a teenager, you'll be expected to work as steadily as any adult. For now you exist in that in-between space, old enough to help, young enough to be forgiven small clumsiness. You intend to use that wisely. Your mother finally fills the bowl with something warm, thin porridge left from the night before, reheated and stretched carefully so it serves everyone. You breathe in the steam, grateful. Outside, the wind rises briefly, rattling the walls, reminding you that the world beyond this longhouse is vast and indifferent. Inside, though, there is fire, family, and the steady rhythm of shared breath. You lift the bowl to your lips, watching the first real light of morning creak through the smoke hole above, and you realise that winter has you firmly in its grip. But for now, you are held just tightly enough to endure. The porridge sits warm in your stomach, but it doesn't linger long as comfort, because winter mornings do not allow you the luxury of drifting thoughts. As soon as the bowls are scraped clean, carefully, because wasting even a smear of food would earn you a sharp look, your mother begins issuing quiet instructions, and the longhouse shifts from waking to working. The door groans open, and a blade of icy air slices straight through the smoky warmth, making everyone flinch in unison. You pull your woolen hood tighter around your head and step toward the entrance with your father, your boots thudding softly against the packed earth floor. The cold outside is immediate and absolute, a presence that fills your lungs and steals your breath for a heartbeat. Snow stretches in every direction, a pale, unbroken sheet except where drifts have sculpted themselves against fences and low stone walls. The sky is a washed-out grey-blue, and the sun, if it rises at all today, will barely skim the horizon before retreating again. Your first task is simple, which in winter means essential. You and your older cousin make your way toward the small shed where firewood is stacked beneath a slanted roof. Every log carried inside is a small victory against the dark. Wood was gathered and chopped in late summer and autumn, when daylight was generous and hands could work without going numb. Now, each piece feels like treasure. You bend, grip a split log, and feel the rough bark bite into your gloves. The wood smells sharp and clean, resinous even in the cold. Your cousin balances an armful against his chest, snowflakes catching in his hair. He pretends not to notice you struggling with a particularly heavy piece, but when it slips, he nudges it upright with his foot, so you can grab it again without losing face. That's the thing about chores here. They are relentless, but they are shared. Back inside, the fire gratefully devours the new fuel. Sparks leap upward, briefly illuminating the rafters where tools hang, fishing nets drying stiffly, carved wooden ladles, a shield rim tucked high out of the way. The longhouse feels smaller in winter, not because it shrinks, but because everyone spends nearly all their time inside. In the Viking Age, longhouses were the heart of rural life across Scandinavia, and settlements in places like Iceland and Greenland. They weren't just homes, they were workshops, kitchens, storerooms, and sometimes even gathering halls for feasts and legal assemblies. In summer, life spills outward into fields and fjords. In winter, it folds inward like a clenched fist. You are sent next to check the animals, which means bracing yourself for the warmer, thicker air at the far end of the hall. The goats shift as you approach, their hooves clicking against the floorboards of their penned area. One of them eyes you suspiciously, possibly the same goat who earlier looked like she had opinions about divine chariots. You reach for a bundle of hay and spread it carefully, mindful not to waste a single stalk. Hay is precious. It was cut and dried months ago, stored in lofts and barns to last through these frozen weeks. If the stores run low before spring, it's not just an inconvenience, it's a crisis. Animals that weaken in winter may not recover. You run your hand along a goat's flank, feeling the coarse fur beneath your palm, and you whisper nonsense to her, a soft string of sounds meant more to reassure yourself than her. Water is harder. The nearby stream has frozen at the edges, and each morning someone must break the thin ice to access the flow beneath. Today, that someone is you and your father. You step back outside, carrying wooden buckets that knock lightly against your legs as you walk. The snow squeaks under your boots, a sound so sharp it almost feels like it belongs to the air rather than the ground. The path to the stream is narrow, trampled by repeated use, and bordered by small drifts that sparkle faintly. Your father walks ahead, his broad shoulders hunched slightly against the wind. He carries an iron-tipped staff, which he uses to test the ground before stepping onto the icy bank. Safety is not dramatic here, it is methodical. At the stream you kneel while your father strikes the ice with controlled force, cracking it open in jagged lines. The sound echoes strangely in the stillness. Beneath the broken surface, dark water moves steadily, indifferent to the cold above. You dip your bucket carefully, watching the current swirl around the rim. The water is so cold it numbs your fingers even through wool, and you pull back quickly once the bucket is filled. As you stand, your father reminds you, not unkindly, that water carried carefully is water not spilled. You nod, focusing hard as you retrace your steps toward the longhouse, each careful footfall a small act of concentration. Inside again, your cheeks burn as sensation returns. The goats bleat softly when you pour water into their trough. Your mother glances over approvingly, already busy near the hearth where she stirs a pot that will simmer most of the day. Winter meals are simple and repetitive: dried fish, salted meat, barley, sometimes a bit of cabbage or turnip stored in a root cellar. Variety is a luxury for warmer seasons. Still, there is comfort in the predictability of it, in knowing that each ingredient represents foresight and labour from months past. As the morning stretches on, you are handed a smaller, but no less important task: shaking out the bedding furs and replacing damp straw beneath the sleeping benches. It's not glamorous work. You haul the heavy pelts outside briefly, beating them against a wooden post to dislodge dust and stray bits of hay. The cold air refreshes them in a way that almost feels clean, though you know they will smell of smoke again within hours. Inside, you scoop out flattened straw and replace it with a fresher layer from a sack stored near the wall. Clean bedding is not about luxury, it's about health. In close quarters like this, sickness spreads easily, and winter illness can turn dangerous fast. You've seen how quickly a cough can deepen, how fever can sap strength. It's one more quiet threat that hums beneath daily life. At some point you pause and glance around the longhouse. The rhythm of chores has settled into something almost soothing. The fire crackles steadily. Your father repairs a wooden tool handle with careful strokes of a knife. Your mother hums under her breath. Your cousin untangles a length of rope, his brow furrowed in exaggerated seriousness. Outside, the light has brightened slightly, though the sun remains a pale rumour behind the clouds. Time here is measured not in hours, but in completed tasks, in wood stacked and water fetched and animals fed. You stretch your back, feeling a small ache settle between your shoulders. It's the kind of ache that tells you you're useful. In this world, usefulness is love translated into action. No one says it outright, but you understand it all the same. Every chore you complete lightens someone else's burden. Every bucket carried, every log stacked, strengthens the fragile shield your family holds up against winter. A gust of wind rattles the door again, and for a moment you imagine the vast white landscape beyond. Silent forests, frozen shores, distant farms where other children your age are likely performing the same rituals of survival. Across Scandinavia, from Norway's fjords to Sweden's inland valleys, families like yours endure these long winters with grit and quiet cooperation. It's a shared experience, stretching across miles and generations. You move back toward the hearth, holding your hands near the flames once more. The morning's hardest tasks are done, at least for now. The day will demand more, it always does, but you've already carved a small path through the cold. And as you stand there, smoke curling gently toward the roof and snow pressing softly against the walls, you feel something steady beneath the weariness, a quiet pride, glowing as persistently as the fire at the centre of your world. The morning's work leaves you hungry in a way that is sharp and hollow, as if the cold has gnawed a little deeper into your ribs than usual. Breakfast in winter is a moment to catch your breath, and it is never wasted on idle talk. The longhouse settles, the door secured against the wind, and bowls are set out with the quiet efficiency of people who have repeated these movements hundreds of times before. There is no glimmering variety, no stacks of pancakes or sweet jams, just a heavy wooden bowl filled with steaming barley porridge, thickened slightly with yesterday's milk, maybe a scrape of butter for those who are young or especially favoured this morning. You feel the warm weight of the bowl in your hands, its edges rough from years of use, and breathe in steam that smells of earth and smoke, and something faintly sweet, the memory of last summer's grass, stored inside the grain. Your father begins to speak in the slow, deliberate way that he always does when the longhouse is quiet and the food is plain. His voice weaves through the air, low and rumbling, recounting tales not of gods or monsters but of the day's small triumphs. a goat who gave birth early last spring, the merchant who passed through last autumn with stories of distant lands where the sun sets red over water, and even, because he cannot resist, a boast about his own skill at wrestling a particularly stubborn log into the hearth without setting his beard on fire. The others laugh, some louder than they should, and you smile around a mouthful of porridge. There's a comfort to the repetition, a reassurance that these stories, like the chores, link one season to the next. The legends of gods and heroes are important, but in winter, the sagas that keep people going are often the ones about surviving the everyday. Someone asks your grandmother to speak, and she obliges with a tale that seems, at first, to be a simple recounting of a day in her childhood, but the details spiral outward, catching the edges of myth. She remembers a winter so harsh the snow piled higher than the door lintel, remembers sledding down the long hill to the river until her fingers turned blue, remembers the strange footprints found circling the longhouse one morning, too big to be wolf, too odd to be bear. You listen, wide-eyed, trying to decide whether to laugh or shiver, and she grins at you, her face creased like a well-loved leather pouch. In every family, there is someone who insists they have seen a troll or spoken to the wights that guard the homestead. You suspect your grandmother might be telling the truth, or at least her version of it. The bowl empties fast. Barley is the staple of winter, the one grain hardy enough to last through months of damp and darkness. Vikings didn't have potatoes, or corn, of course, and you think for a moment about how strange it must have been to eat the same thing every day, every season, until the idea of variety feels as distant as summer itself. On rare mornings, a little dried fruit might appear, a handful of cloudberries or slices of apple, shriveled and tart. Today there are none, but your mother drops a dollop of honey into her own bowl, the last from a pot traded at the autumn fair, and you watch the golden swirl disappear almost instantly into the grey porridge. Honey, you know, is precious. It comes from wild hives, sometimes found by following the flight of bees deep into the summer woods, and is saved for medicine, offerings to the gods, and, just occasionally, for a sweet moment in the heart of winter. The conversation drifts, as conversations do when everyone is warm and full and not quite ready to rise again. Your uncle, who travelled with a trading crew the year before, starts to tell a story about a great city in the south, a place so large that the streets themselves are paved with stone and filled with merchants from lands you've never heard of. He describes ships as wide as fields, carrying spices that burn the tongue and dyes so bright they seem impossible. You imagine a world beyond the horizon, where there is always sun and never a day when your boots fill with snow. The adults joke about the wild exaggerations of sailors, but you sense the envy in their laughter. Even here, in the dim quiet of winter, the world outside never quite lets go. Then the talk turns, as it so often does, to the little dangers that fill the gaps in a Viking child's life. Someone mentions the Draugr, the restless dead who are said to wander in storms, searching for warmth and mischief. Another adult recalls the time a travelling peddler claimed to have met a woman who could speak with the dead, and who sold charms meant to keep ill luck away from the home. Your mother shakes her head, but you notice she has a tiny bag of bones and herbs tied above the door, just in case. Belief is not always about conviction. Sometimes it's about being cautious, about not tempting fate. A light joke bubbles up. Your cousin mimics the creaky groan of the door and announces in a ghostly wail that the Draugr is coming for anyone who hasn't finished their chores. The younger children squeal, half scared, half delighted, and you roll your eyes, but you feel a chill, just the same. Fear, you realise, is another tool for survival. It keeps you wary, keeps you from wandering too far at dusk, keeps you close to the fire when the wind howls. In the brief lull that follows, you listen to the quiet around you. The longhouse breathes, the low rumble of conversation, the shifting of the goats, the popping of the fire. A raven calls somewhere outside, its voice harsh against the hush of snow. Ravens, you've been told, are messengers, clever enough to steal meat from the gods themselves. You wonder what it would be like to fly above the longhouse, black wings beating against the pale sky, seeing everything from above, the neat lines of the fields, the winding track down to the frozen shore, the scattered homes of neighbours and distant kin. Breakfast ends not with a grand declaration, but with a slow scattering. Bowls are rinsed in the leftover water, set upside down to dry. The ashes in the hearth are stirred, the fire fed again. Your grandmother sits back and closes her eyes, her head nodding gently. Your father stands, stretches, and begins to plan aloud for the rest of the day. Always more to do, even when the snow seems to press the world to a halt. You feel the rhythm of life here settle back into place. Eat, work, rest, repeat. Each beat guided by the season's slow drum. Before you rise, your mother catches your eye and leans close, her voice low, so only you can hear. She tells you, almost as if it's a secret, that winter is the time when the world grows thin, when it is easiest for dreams and spirits to slip through the cracks in the longhouse walls. You nod, not entirely sure if she's teasing, but you vow to keep an extra eye on the shadows tonight, just in case. Every family has a handful of quiet superstitions, whispered like lullabies or warnings. Some you outgrow, some you keep forever, tucked like lucky stones into the corners of your mind. Outside, the wind shifts again, rattling a wooden shutter and sending a flurry of snow against the walls. The day is calling, and breakfast, warm and grounding as it was, must give way to the cycle of chores and the cold world waiting just beyond the door. You stand, brush a crumb from your tunic, and step back into the swirl of daily life. Your belly full, but your mind spinning with stories, half-truths, and the strange comfort of knowing that, here in the longhouse, everyone is just trying to hold back the winter together, one meal and one legend, at a time. You leave the dying warmth of breakfast behind, and drift into the gentle chaos of the longhouse, where morning's labour has given way to quieter moments, the sort that, if you're lucky, are spent near the fire rather than out in the wind. You settle on a rough-hewn stool close to the flames, your feet curled beneath you, the edges of your woolen tunic brushing the ashy earth. All around, the adults begin their work in earnest. Your mother pulls a spindle from her basket, her fingers already twisting raw wool into thread. Your father kneels by a battered shield, scraping away at old paint so he can reapply a new layer, red and bold. But for you, there is no hammer or needle just yet. Instead, the elders have decided this morning will be for learning, a lesson not of muscle and frostbite, but of memory and meaning. Your grandfather, stooped and grey-bearded, motions for you and your cousins to gather near. The others grumble a bit. They'd rather be roughhousing outside, testing the frozen ice with sticks or chasing after the goats. But there's a subtle thrill when the oldest among you are invited to sit with the elders. You settle into a semicircle on sheepskins, the fire casting slow-moving shadows across the ring of attentive faces. Your grandfather clears his throat, leans forward, and draws with the tip of a stick in the loose ash by the hearth. The first lines are simple and straight, a symbol you recognise, a rune. Runes, you've been told, are more than just letters. They're keys, doors, secrets, each one with its own story, its own power. He sketches the rune for Fehu, wealth and cattle, the prosperity that feeds and clothes a household. He tells you that in this land, true wealth isn't gold hoarded in a chest, but the goats chewing cud just beyond the wall, the grain stacked in the storeroom, the strength of your family's arms. He speaks in a voice that's slow and measured, a cadence worn smooth by years of telling. Each word seems to settle deep inside you, a truth both old and sharp. He traces Algiz, the protection rune, and then Ansu's, the rune of Odin, the god of wisdom, whose eye sees what others miss. You reach out. tracing the symbol in the ash when he invites you, feeling the brittle line of knowledge passing from his hand to yours. Your aunt interrupts, only half joking, to remind you that runes are not toys. Never carve a rune unless you know its meaning, she says, her eyes bright in the firelight. The wrong word brings trouble, even if your hands meant well. The others nod solemnly, and you swallow, feeling the weight of responsibility settle a little more firmly on your narrow shoulders. The lesson stretches on, not just about runes, but about the tangled web of kin and duty that defines your world. Your grandfather names each ancestor back 4 generations, linking them with the same pride someone in another place might name their favourite kings. Honour matters, more than you realise, more than you sometimes wish. What you do reflects on everyone, even those long dead. When the lesson turns to the rules of sharing, how to split a haunch of meat, when to speak and when to listen, what to offer the household spirits before bedtime, your attention wavers, just a little. You notice how the firelight dances on your cousin's hair, how the old dog curled by the wall twitches in a dream. You think about the bone pendant your father wears around his neck, carved in the likeness of a raven, passed down from his mother's father. You wonder if someday you will have something to pass down too, a tiny anchor in the flood of winters still to come. Then, just as you're about to drift into daydreams, your grandfather tells a story that snaps you straight. He describes the time he fell through river ice as a boy, a careless misstep while showing off for his older brothers. The shock of the water, the instant numbness, the panic. He remembers how his mother's arms felt when she pulled him free, the way she wrapped him in furs and wept, and how for a week afterward she left tiny offerings at the hearth, muttering prayers to the ancestors and the spirits that dwell in water and stone. Survival is more than muscle, he says quietly. It's knowing when to ask for help, from the living and from the old gods. The others are silent, listening. Even your youngest cousin, who usually fidgets and whispers, is spellbound. You look at your hands, small and red from the cold, and for a fleeting moment you see them as part of a much longer story, one that stretches backward through the blizzards and forward into whatever springs may come. The longhouse feels timeless, suspended somewhere between the smoke-darkened rafters and the frost outside. For a moment, you are both ancient and new. When the lesson ends, your grandmother hands each of you a thin sliver of dried apple. A treat so rare in winter it feels almost magical. She warns you, as she always does, to eat slowly, to savour the memory of sweetness, to remember that in lean times, even the smallest kindness is a feast. You nod, tucking the taste away as carefully as you would a secret. But learning isn't only for children. The adults too must adapt, must solve daily puzzles and recall old wisdom. Your father crouches near the door, using a bone awl to repair a crack in one of his boots. He mutters that the leather was never meant for this much snow, and you watch as he threads sinew through the tough hide with movements that are quick, sure, almost graceful. Your mother's spindle keeps spinning, a slow hypnotic rhythm, the wool twisting into thread that will become new clothes, or perhaps a patch for the tent like sails used in the summer months. The skills of the household are passed along in moments like these, not with lectures, but with hands-on lessons, a stitch here, a knot there, always with a practical reason. Every so often, someone glances at the door. The wind rattles it, snow seeping through the cracks. It is said that in old times, people would paint runes or carve charms into their doorposts to keep bad luck out and invite good fortune in. You think of the Algiz rune, its upward-reaching lines, and wonder if you could draw it small enough that only you would know it's there, maybe tomorrow, if you're quick and careful. The morning lesson drifts into quiet work. The adults fall into their own patterns, some mending fishing nets for the distant promise of spring, some shaping bone and antler into buttons or needles, some just sitting with their thoughts, eyes half-lidded, listening to the lull of the fire and the distant howls of wind across the snow. You feel a strange comfort in the soft hum of activity. It's a rhythm older than stories, a kind of music that can only be heard when the world is wrapped in snow and the light outside is thin and uncertain. Just as you're about to slip outside for a moment's air, your mother calls you back to the fire. She asks you to help her sort through a small chest of odds and ends, scraps of cloth, bits of metal, the stub of a candle. Together, you decide what can be saved, what must be set aside for burning, what might someday be repurposed. Waste nothing, she says, because in winter, everything matters. Even the ashes from the fire will be scattered in the garden come spring. A quiet hope that something green will grow where now only snow lies thick. For a fleeting moment, as you hold a battered copper brooch in your hand, you imagine it shining bright on the chest of some long-ago ancestor, caught in sunlight rather than firelight. You wonder about the stories it might have seen, the hands that polished it, the voices that called it their own. History here is not something kept in books. It is lived, breathed, worn and whispered, passing from mouth to ear as the winter grinds on outside. The lesson ends without ceremony. Your grandfather stands and stretches, the joints in his knees cracking. He tousles your hair, a rough sign of affection, and reminds you to use your eyes and ears more than your mouth. The wise child grows tall, he says, not just strong. You tuck the advice away alongside the stories and the runes and the taste of dried apple, and you know that even as winter presses tight around your world, you are not just surviving, but gathering the threads that will someday weave you into the fabric of this family, this longhouse, this strange and beautiful life. When the fireside learning fades and the chores reach a brief lull, you sense a quiet restlessness building among the children in the longhouse. The adults are absorbed in their steady tasks, repairing a tool, twisting wool, scraping a wooden spoon to a smooth sheen, but your young muscles ache for something more than gentle labour. You exchange a glance with your cousin, and without a word, the two of you slip toward the doorway, boots crunching lightly on the straw. Your mother's voice calls out, reminding you not to stray too far, not to cross the creek, not to forget your hats or mitts. You promise all three in one hasty breath, and shove open the heavy wooden door, letting a swirl of sharp winter air slice through the smoky warmth behind you. Outside, the world is dazzling in its brightness. The snow, untrodden in the far reaches of the yard, glitters with a cold fire, the sun little more than a weak coin in the sky, but still enough to cast sharp shadows across the white expanse. The air has that perfect northern clarity, so cold and dry that it feels like glass in your lungs. Your boots sink into the snow with each step, leaving prints that seem impossibly small and fragile in this endless landscape. For a moment, the silence is so complete you can hear your own heart, the faint crackle of ice beneath the thin crust, and the far-off call of a raven circling overhead, black against the sky. Your cousin scoops up a handful of snow, packs it tight, and fires the first missile of the morning directly at your back. It shatters with a satisfying sting, and you let out a shout, more joy than anger. Within moments, all pretense of calm is lost, and the yard becomes a wild battlefield, snowballs flying, laughter ringing so loudly you worry the hidden folk beneath the drifts might take offence. You duck behind the half-buried woodpile, grab a shield of bark, and declare yourself king of the hill, a position that lasts exactly as long as it takes your cousin to sneak around behind and dump a load of snow down your collar. The cold sends shivers straight to your spine, and you yelp, stumbling out of your fortress with a howl. Your cousin is already racing away, boots barely making a sound, her cheeks flushed red and her grin wide as the river in spring. In the midst of this chaos, another friend joins, a neighbour's son, whose family's longhouse stands a short walk away, though in winter it might as well be another country. He brings a carved stick, and soon a new contest is underway, hitting a knucklebone, borrowed from the butchered remains of last autumn's sheep, back and forth across the icy yard. The stick game is part fun, part practice. You've heard stories of grown warriors honing their aim in childhood with these games, pretending the knucklebone is a foe's shield, a rabbit in the snow, or even, on daring days, the head of a rival chieftain. Today it is mostly a blur of quick hands and wild laughter, the knucklebone skidding across the frozen ground, the three of you sliding after it, tripping and tumbling and springing back up like nothing in the world could ever hurt you. Now and then, you pause to catch your breath, chests heaving, faces raw from the cold and the effort. You watch the pale sun move a finger-width higher above the tree line, and notice how the snow sparkles differently depending on the angle. Sometimes blue, sometimes silver, once even a fleeting gold. You wonder aloud if treasure might lie buried beneath the drifts, secreted away by some ancient king or long-forgotten spirit. Your cousin snorts at the idea, but your neighbour solemnly swears that his grandfather once found a silver ring in the earth by the river. Proof, he says, that the land is thick with the bones and belongings of those who came before. Soon the games turn from snowballs and knucklebones to wrestling. You and your cousin square off, knees bent, hands out, circling like cats. It is less about winning and more about testing. Your strength, your balance, your willingness to take a fall and come up laughing. In the Viking world, wrestling isn't just a pastime. It's training, a way to build the bodies and minds that must someday withstand not only the weight of a shield, but the uncertainty of harvests, storms and war. You remember tales told by your uncle of wrestling matches that lasted so long the participants were dusted in frost by the end, of a girl from a neighbouring farm who once pinned every boy in her village, and you feel the thrill of history in your bones as you throw your cousin, land hard, and come up with a face full of snow and pride in equal measure. Every so often, an adult pokes their head out the door, checking on your progress, or perhaps simply hungry for the taste of cold air and laughter. Once, your father steps onto the stoop, a mug of warm ale in hand, and watches as you and your friends reenact a raid on a make-believe village composed entirely of snow piles and sticks. He shakes his head, amused, and tells you not to lose any teeth, or come back with a nose too badly scraped. His own childhood was filled with the same games, you suspect, though he is quick to remind you that in his day, children respected their elders and never ever threw snow at a passing goat. You grin, and a goat in the yard gives you a look that suggests she remembers every snowball ever launched in her direction. As the morning wanes, the energy of your play begins to flag. The sun barely crests the treetops before it starts its slow decline, and the wind grows sharper, biting at the tips of your ears and fingers no matter how tightly you wrap your mitts. You gather for one last contest, a race around the longhouse, the winner to claim the last dried apple slice stashed in your cousin's pocket. You run as hard as you can, boots slipping, lungs burning, the snow beneath your feet packed hard and slippery from hours of play. The finish line is a tangle of arms and legs, everyone claiming victory, everyone too breathless to argue for long. As you collapse in a heap, laughter trailing into quiet, you notice the oddest thing. A little ring of footprints circling the house, small and perfectly round. You trace them with a stick, your friends leaning in close. No one can say for certain if they are the tracks of a bird, a squirrel, or something stranger, but the mystery is enough to send a shiver of excitement through the group. Your cousin whispers that the Landvittier, the land spirits, sometimes come near the houses in winter, checking to see if the children are behaving or if there is a crust of bread left for them by the door. You glance at the threshold, remembering the heel of rye left out by your grandmother the night before, and wonder if the spirits are watching even now, tucked beneath the roots of the old birch or hidden in the hollow where the snow is deepest. Your neighbour's mother calls him home, her voice carrying clear and bright over the snow. He waves, dashes off, leaving you and your cousin alone again in the quiet yard. The wind picks up, swirling flakes from the roof in tiny, sparkling tornadoes. You scoop up a handful, let the crystals fall through your gloved fingers, and wonder how each flake can be so cold, so small, and yet together have the power to stop armies, bury villages, and turn the world so quiet you can hear your own heart beating. There is a joke in there somewhere, you're sure. Something about never underestimating the power of small, cold things working together. You turn toward the house, the promise of fire and warmth pulling at you, but you linger for just a moment longer, your breath curling in the air. The games you play in the snow are not just ways to pass the time, but rehearsals for the life you will someday lead. Each throw, each fall, each laugh is a lesson tucked away for the seasons to come. When childhood gives way to the seriousness of planting, of harvesting, of defending what is yours. For now, though, you are simply a child, alive and wild, part of a world both ancient and fleeting, as bright and cold and astonishing as the snow that covers everything you see. With boots heavy and mittens soaked, you finally trudge back inside, cheeks stinging, eyes bright, carrying the cold with you like a badge of honour. The longhouse door creaks open, and you step into the golden hush of the hearth, the laughter of the yard still echoing in your bones, and the quiet knowledge that, for all the harshness of this winter life, there is nowhere else you'd rather be. The door closes behind you with a deep, satisfying thunk, shutting out the blue-white glare of the snow and wrapping you in the gentle, familiar gloom of the longhouse. Your eyes need a moment to adjust. The flickering hearth seems almost blinding after the brilliance of the outdoors. A cloud of steam rises from your skin as the frost melts from your hair and mitts, the dampness sinking quickly into your clothes, leaving you shivering in a way that's oddly pleasant. The smell of home is stronger now, wood smoke, wool, and that sharp, ever-present tang of animal, layered over with the faint sweetness of something stewing on the fire. There's a rhythm to the day here, an ebb and flow between outside and in, between work and play, and now, as midday approaches, the pattern bends toward the animals, their care as vital and time-consuming as any other duty in the frozen heart of winter. You peel off your heavy outer layer and stomp your boots free of packed snow, then glance toward the animal end of the longhouse. It's separated by little more than a low partition, and the persistent smell of hay and dung, but in winter, the difference between human and animal space is more a matter of degree than of kind. The goats greet your return with a series of soft, insistent bleats, their noses twitching in the cold air. The sheep stand a little further back, eyes dark and curious, heavy fleeces dusted with bits of straw. You always feel a strange sense of companionship with these creatures, as if you're all co-conspirators in the grand project of staying alive until the world thaws. Today, your task is to help tend the herd. Your mother and father are already there, working in practiced silence. Your father leans over a ewe, carefully trimming her hooves with a curved iron knife, while your mother scoops out grain from a rough clay pot, portioning it with a strict fairness that seems to satisfy even the hungriest goat. You take your place beside your little brother, who is charged with the job of gathering fresh straw for bedding. He drags a bundle from the stack, scattering bits everywhere, and you help spread it in thick, clean layers under the animal's feet. The goats waste no time in claiming the best patches, circling and settling with contented grumbles, their bodies warm enough that you can see steam rising from their flanks. You brush your hands down their sides, feeling the pulse of life through wool and bone, and realise, not for the first time, that these animals are as much family as resource. They're part of the long, unbroken circle of care that keeps the house standing and the bellies full. The chores are repetitive, almost meditative. You check the water buckets, breaking the thin crust of ice that has formed even here inside. The chickens, fewer now than in summer, cluck indignantly from their roost, waiting for a handful of grain or a bit of leftover porridge. You laugh as a goat tugs playfully at the end of your scarf, trying to chew it, her lips surprisingly dexterous. Your mother scolds her gently, but the goat only blinks and wags her stubby tail, clearly unbothered by human rules. Somewhere nearby, your father mutters about foxes, recounting how he found tracks near the chicken coop at dawn. He tells you to keep an eye out, to shout if you see movement by the woodpile. In winter, every animal is precious. Even a single loss can mean a leaner spring. As you work, your mind wanders, tracing connections between chores and stories you've heard by the fire. You recall the time your uncle came home from the market, boasting of a neighbour whose cow had given birth to twins, a lucky omen, everyone agreed, and the family held a feast to celebrate. You wonder if luck lives in the animals, if their well-being is tied to your own. The old songs sometimes say so, that the spirits of home and field are most content when every beast is tended with kindness, when nothing goes hungry or uncomforted. You decide, as you brush a stray piece of straw from the smallest lamb's head, that you'll always try to remember this lesson, even on the days when you're tired and the barn is cold. After the last feeding is done, your mother gives you a sly look and sends you to collect eggs, a task you share with your cousin, who arrives carrying a woven basket. The chickens are never pleased to surrender their treasures, and you laugh as one stubborn hen fluffs her feathers and refuses to budge. You negotiate gently, offering a handful of grain in exchange for just a few eggs, and when she finally relents, you lift them from the straw, still warm from her body. You cradle each egg carefully, aware of how easily they could break, how fragile even the most everyday things are in a world where nothing is truly guaranteed. The basket is soon filled, and you carry it back across the house, proud and careful, as if you are transporting gold. While you work, your grandmother sits nearby, spinning wool on her spindle. She tells you stories as she works, of lambs born with 2 heads, of cows who wander away in a storm and return days later, led by the light of the stars. She claims, in her half-serious way, that some animals have a touch of magic in them, that if you listen closely on the coldest night of the year, you might hear them speaking in human words, telling secrets to the darkness. You smile at the thought, not entirely sure whether to believe or not, but secretly hoping the story is true. Magic, after all, is just another kind of possibility. There is a rhythm to animal care that feels both ancient and soothing. You clean troughs, refill hay nets, and sweep out the mess with a crude broom. The work is never ending, but never wasted. Every muscle, every ache, is a contribution to the life of the house. Even the youngest children are given a part, a handful of grain to scatter, a stick to prod the lazy goat, a song to sing that makes the sheep twitch their ears and calm their nerves. In a world where survival depends on everyone doing their share, there is a strange equality between child and adult, human and beast. Once the chores are done, you lean against the wooden wall, breath steaming in the cool air, and let yourself rest for a moment. The animals settle too, their noises fading into a low hum of contentment. You feel a warm sense of pride, knowing that the work you do here matters, that it keeps the small world of the longhouse spinning through the endless winter. Your mother passes by and ruffles your hair, her hand rough and warm. She doesn't say thank you, but she doesn't need to. The look in her eyes is enough. Your cousin joins you, the two of you sitting in companionable silence, sharing the last crumbs of a dried apple slice. You talk quietly, voices low so as not to disturb the animals, about the coming spring, the promise of new grass and lambs and sunlight that lasts more than a handful of hours. You wonder aloud what it would be like to see the world from the back of a goat, to follow the herd through snowdrifts and forests, to sleep under the stars. Your cousin laughs and says you'd freeze your nose off before midnight, but for a moment you both imagine it, a wild, strange freedom in a world that feels so small and so infinite all at once. The longhouse grows quieter as the sun slips lower in the sky, the light fading to a soft blue. The animals doze, bellies full, bodies warm, and you feel yourself drifting, too, lulled by the gentle sounds of breathing, the soft scratch of straw, the distant crackle of the hearth. There is a peace here, a sense of belonging that is deeper than words. You realise as you close your eyes for just a moment that these animals, this work, this warmth, is the heart of your winter world, the thing that makes every frozen day worth enduring, every dark night a little less lonely. Afternoon creeps in almost unnoticed, a subtle dimming of the pale light that slants through the smoke hole, a gentle thickening of the hush inside the longhouse. With the animals fed and dozing, the cold at bay for the moment, life folds back into the rhythm of winter craftwork. You peel yourself away from the straw and the soft chorus of bleats and follow your mother to the place beside the fire where her hands are never still. The house settles, the air perfumed with wool and wood and something rich simmering in a pot. And soon the family divides into smaller constellations. Your grandfather sharpening a blade, your older cousin plucking at the sinews of a bowstring, your little brother sitting cross-legged with a handful of river stones, trying to stack them into an unlikely tower. Your mother hands you a spindle, its haul worn smooth and warm from years of use, and you know, without complaint, what is expected. Winter is the season of making, of patching and mending, and no one, no matter how small, is excused from learning the magic of turning the ordinary into the essential. Wool work is as endless as the snow outside. You watch as your mother pinches a bit of fleece from the pile beside her knee, draws it out, and with deft fingers sets the spindle spinning. The fibres twist, lengthen, tighten, and become thread, soft, strong, the foundation of everything you wear and many of the things you use. She shows you again how to keep the twist even, how not to let the fibres break or tangle. You try, tongue pressed to your teeth in concentration, your fingers clumsy but learning. Every mistake is quickly righted, every snarl met with patience. You realise that what you are really spinning, more than thread, is a kind of memory, the wisdom of countless winters passed down through touch, through practice, through repetition. Craftwork in the longhouse is not limited to spinning. Someone is always whittling a spoon, carving a small animal from driftwood, patching the soles of worn boots with leftover scraps of leather, or plaiting cord from flax. You watch your grandfather shape a fishhook from bone, his hands steady, his eyes narrowed in focus. The tasks are small but vital, and there's a quiet pride in seeing the pile of finished goods grow each week. New mittens with bright bands of colour, a net mended and ready for spring, a wooden bowl smooth as river stone. Sometimes your mother sings as she works, her voice low and sure. The song a thread tying past to present, an old tune about a girl who spun gold from straw, a tune you've heard in every season of your life. You join in where you can, threading wool through a darning needle, patching a hole in your sock, carving your name in clumsy runes onto the handle of a spoon. Each little accomplishment feels huge. Your hands ache with the effort, but you know, because you've been told often enough, that a clever hand in winter is as important as a strong arm in summer. Vikings, you've heard, were famous for their crafts as well as their swords. Traders brought amber from the Baltic, soapstone from the far north, and glass beads from the lands of the Franks. But inside your home, the best treasures are the things made by the people you love, a carved comb, a soft hat, a sturdy basket that will outlast the snow. There are jokes too, weaving through the work like bright threads. Your uncle teases your mother about her spindle, saying she spins so quickly the sheep grow dizzy. Your little brother insists his lopsided stone tower is taller than the Jotunheim giants' castles. Someone lets out a yawn so big it threatens to swallow the fire. The laughter is quiet, but it chases the gloom from the corners and reminds you that winter is not just endured, it is inhabited, reshaped by creativity, lightened by play. A visitor arrives just as you're settling into the steady rhythm of spinning and mending. The door opens with a gust of icy wind, and in steps a neighbour from farther down the valley, his beard thick with frost, his cloak crusted in snow. He stamps his boots, greets the room with a wave, and is quickly ushered to the fire. You listen as he trades news with your father, how his flock fared in last night's cold, what he's heard about the road to the village, which family's child is down with fever but expected to recover. You watch the way the adults lean in, their questions practical, their worries shared. In winter, news is as precious as honey. Information about a broken bridge, a sick animal, or a stray wolf could make all the difference. You offer the visitor a mug of weak ale, as is custom, and sit nearby as he pulls something from his bag. A pouch of coarse salt traded with fishermen on the coast, a bundle of dried herbs for your grandmother's remedies, and, most exciting of all, a tiny bone carving shaped like a bear. He gives it to your little brother, who holds it up to the firelight and beams. Gifts in winter are never wasted. Even the smallest token is a promise that connections will hold, that the fabric of your world won't unravel with the coming thaw. The visitor stays only long enough to thaw his boots and share the news. When he leaves, he is wrapped in a spare scarf, your mother's, old and patched but warm. You realise as you watch him vanish into the grey twilight that these small exchanges, wool for salt, news for warmth, a carving for a smile, are the glue that holds your scattered community together through the hardest months. It is a kind of economy, yes, but also a culture, a tacit understanding that generosity is its own reward, and that someday, perhaps soon, it will be your family in need of extra help. Afternoon deepens, and the work continues. You switch to carving, guided by your father's big hands, who shows you how to shape a piece of driftwood into the rough outline of a horse. He tells you, not for the first time, that every child in the house should know how to mend, make and fix. There will be days, he says, when all you have is what you can create from what's left behind. The thought frightens and comforts you at the same time. You dig the knife into the wood, careful, steady, and picture the little horse galloping through green grass in some distant spring. You pause occasionally to warm your hands by the fire, to sneak a piece of dried fish from the pot, to tease your brother about his lumpy rock tower, now leaning dangerously to one side. Your mother asks for your help winding a skein of wool, and you stand behind her, arms outstretched as the yarn snakes from her hands to yours and back again, a slow, mesmerizing dance. You are tired, and your fingers throb, but you feel rooted in the moment, as if the world outside, so vast, so cold, so indifferent, has shrunk down to just this. The circle of firelight, the quiet work, the unspoken promise that here, inside, you are safe. As dusk creeps closer, you finish your horse and hold it up to the light. It is rough, uneven, nothing a trader would buy, but your father smiles and ruffles your hair. It will run fast enough for you, he says, and you tuck it into your pocket, another small memory to keep you warm. The crafts of winter are more than chores. They are amulets against boredom, spells against despair, reminders that, even in the deepest freeze, the hands and minds of your family can still make something beautiful, useful, or simply lasting. When the sun finally slips away and the world outside turns blue and strange, you help your mother gather the day's work into baskets and sacks, setting it aside for later, mended socks, new thread, your little wooden horse. The fire is stirred, the door barred, and everyone gathers close once more. You stretch your sore hands, feeling the stiffness in your joints, but you are content in a way that only comes after a day spent turning the plainest things into proof that you belong, that you can shape the world even as it tries to shape you. Night is coming, and with it, new work and new stories, but for now, you are wrapped in the quiet satisfaction of a day's craft. One more thread in the long, winding tapestry of your Viking winter. Night falls quickly in the deep of winter, the transition from afternoon to evening barely more than a breath. One moment, the pale blue twilight glimmers through the gaps in the roof beams, and the next, darkness presses soft and absolute against the turf walls, broken only by the restless glow of the central hearth. The air inside the longhouse thickens with the sense of wool and wood smoke and stew, and you find yourself drifting from the work of your hands toward the drifting conversation, the slow spiral of news and rumour and memory that always comes when daylight finally gives up. The fire is stoked higher, everyone pressing a little closer to its heat, and you feel that pleasant ache in your arms and back. The reward for a day spent spinning, patching, carving and mending. This, you think, is what it means to belong to a house in winter. You work until your muscles sing, then you gather and listen, and let the world beyond the door shrink to the size of a single room. Tonight, a hush settles over the room that is both expectant and anxious. There's talk of visitors, strangers from the next valley, traders perhaps, or maybe messengers sent by a chieftain to discuss the coming spring. You glance at your father, who sits quietly at the edge of the fire's circle, sharpening his axe in slow, deliberate motions. His eyes are distant, the lines at their corners deepened by worry. He tells you, not unkindly, that winter is a season for patience, but his words have a weight to them. In the Viking world, news always rides in with the travellers, some of it welcome, much of it sharp and cold as the wind. Soon enough the knock comes, 3 firm raps on the thick wooden door, followed by a short pause and 2 more. It is a rhythm you've heard before, code among friends, a signal that whoever stands outside brings neither sword nor ill intent. Your mother hurries to open the door, letting in a burst of frigid air and a swirl of snowflakes that spark briefly in the firelight before vanishing. The visitors are wrapped in heavy cloaks, their faces shadowed and red from the cold, boots caked with ice and road grime. You watch as they shake themselves off, offer brief bows, and step inside, stamping their feet against the threshold in the old way, part custom, part superstition, a sign to the house spirits that they bring no trouble. Introductions are exchanged, names you know from summer markets and autumn fairs, but there is an edge to the greetings tonight. The travellers have news from the coast, the ice in the fjord is thinner than expected, a trading ship from the south was delayed by storms, and, most unsettling of all, a band of raiders was spotted moving north just before the snow set in. The words drift through the longhouse like a cold draught, and even the youngest among you can feel the air sharpen. Raiders are a part of life, a danger woven through every winter, but their presence so close means extra vigilance. Nights when the fire is kept burning higher and the axes stay close at hand. You shiver, not just from the cold that lingers on the visitor's clothes, but from the knowledge that the world outside your small circle can shift in an instant from safe to perilous. But it isn't all warnings and fear. With the travellers come stories, some half true, some wild, all mesmerising. You lean forward as one of the men describes a voyage he made 2 winters past, travelling east along the coast, bartering furs and carved bone in villages you've only heard of in tales. He speaks of rivers so wide they swallow the sky, of forests so thick that the sun disappears at midday, of strange animals with horns like trees, and of fish that glow beneath the ice. His companion, older, quieter, pulls a pouch from his belt and spills a handful of objects into the firelight, coins stamped with marks you don't recognise, a scrap of blue glass that catches the flame and shatters it into rainbows, a curved comb of amber. The adults nod and murmur, weighing each item's worth, but for you, these are treasures from another world, proof that there is something beyond snow and chores and the slow crawl of winter days. There are quieter stories too, and these are the ones that settle deepest into your bones. Tales of small kindnesses, of a stranger who shared his last loaf of bread on a stormy night, of a woman who braved the ice to fetch medicine for a sick child, of a group of men who rebuilt a roof after the wind tore it away, asking nothing in return but the promise of a song in spring. You listen heart-thumping, and realise that every journey, every risk, every mile crossed through snow and darkness is made not just for trade or conquest, but for the thread of connection that holds scattered farms and lonely houses together. The grown-ups nod, their faces solemn in the flickering light, and you sense the relief that comes from knowing you are not as alone as winter sometimes makes you feel. Dinner is served as the stories run their course, and tonight the meal feels like a celebration barley stew thickened with last autumn's root vegetables, a strip of dried venison, a little cheese saved for guests, and, most exciting, thin slices of pickled herring, a taste so sharp it nearly makes your eyes water. You sit on your bench with the others, elbow to elbow, sharing bread, trading bites, listening to the wind pressing against the walls. The travellers eat heartily, thanking your mother with every second mouthful, and you watch as your father quietly sets aside a small portion for the house spirits, tucking it into a crack in the hearthstone, just in case. After the meal, the visitors prepare to leave, but your father asks them to stay, just for a night, he says, until the wind eases and the sky clears. The offer is made in the old way, with a hand on the heart and a look that says more than words ever could. The travellers accept, and bedding is fetched from the corner, furs and blankets laid out near the fire. Your mother places a lamp near their sleeping place, a small flame flickering in a bowl of oil, and you notice how the shadows it throws dance and stretch along the beams, making the longhouse feel both bigger and smaller all at once. Before sleep, the grown-ups linger over their ale, talking quietly about trade routes and chieftains and the shape of the coming year. You and your cousins sit nearby, pretending not to listen, your ears pricked for every bit of gossip or hint of adventure. You hear talk of distant lands, places with names you can't quite imagine, and you dream of seeing them yourself, riding a longship through stormy seas, bartering for silks and spices, returning home with stories so grand they would outshine even the wildest tales told tonight. Your cousin nudges you, whispers a joke about getting lost in the woods outside, and you both stifle giggles, the kind that make your bellies ache and your eyes water. Eventually, the conversation fades, and one by one, the household settles. The fire is banked but not allowed to die, a watch kept for sparks and for the shape of shadows in the corners. You curl into your bedding, the day's stories circling in your mind. There is a comfort in knowing that news comes from far away, that the world is bigger than your valley, but also a small terror, a reminder that storms, men and fate can reach even the most careful, well-defended home. As you drift towards sleep, you hear your father's voice, quiet but steady, reciting the old blessing for travellers. May the road rise to meet you, may the wind be at your back, and may the spirits of this house keep you safe till morning. You repeat the words silently, lips barely moving, and pull your furs tighter, letting the warmth of family, friends and stories keep the darkness at bay for one more winter night. Long after the travellers' voices fade and the fire shrinks to a pool of embers, the longhouse grows quieter, but the world inside feels charged with something ancient, something more than just the hush of night. You're old enough now that sleep comes a little slower, especially on nights like these when stories still swirl in your head and the cold gnaws at the edge of your blanket. Outside, the wind picks up, scraping the eaves with icy fingernails, and the snow hisses softly against the door, as if something in the dark is trying to get in, or trying to remind you it's always out there. You pull your furs tighter, burrowing close to your cousin and little brother, both already drifting, their breathing slow and deep. The visitors are bedded down near the fire, their boots drying, their faces turned away in dreams of distant roads. But for you, the night is alive with the possibilities that come when the grown-ups let slip a few stories too many. On these deepest winter nights, the old beliefs come to life. It starts almost as a game. Your cousin, eyes wide and voice barely above a whisper, asks if you think the spirits are real. The house is so still you can hear the goats snuffling, the faint crackle of sap in the logs, and somewhere a slow, deliberate tap-tap-tap. Maybe a tree branch, or maybe something older than the house or the valley or the people who settled here. You remember your grandmother's warnings not to speak the names of the spirits after dark, but that only makes the urge stronger. You trade stories in hushed voices, swapping rumours about trolls in the forest and Hulderfolk, the hidden people who are said to live beneath the rocks and hills, only coming out in the blue hours when the moon is high and children are supposed to be asleep. The grown-ups might laugh about it in the light of day, but at night the boundaries feel thinner, between now and then, between here and there. You think of the small amulets tied above the door, the way your father always spits 3 times into the fire after telling a bad dream, the bread your mother leaves by the threshold for the landvitter. These aren't just habits, you realise, they're bargains. Promises that if you respect the old ways, maybe the old things will respect you in turn. Your mind lingers on the tales of Odin, wandering the world in disguise, his one eye bright as a winter star, seeking wisdom in unlikely places. You picture him moving through the night, his cloak swirling like storm clouds, his ravens perched on his shoulders, gathering secrets from every crack and shadow. You wonder what the gods think of winter, whether they feel the cold, or if they simply ride above it, travelling from house to house in the night. The grown-ups say this is the time of year when Odin moves through the world most freely, his wild hunt raging across the sky, sometimes glimpsed as a swirl of lights or a sudden, unnatural gust of wind. If you listen hard enough, some say, you can hear the barking of spectral hounds, the cries of ancient warriors following their god across the stars. You shiver, both from fear and delight. You want to believe the world is big enough for these stories to be true. The conversation drifts to the rituals that keep the house safe. How your uncle swears by burning juniper in the hearth on the first night of Yule. How your mother once tied red thread around the wrists of every child to ward off bad dreams. You think of the strange offerings tucked away in the corners, a dried fish for the sea spirits, a sprig of evergreen for the forest wights, even a crust of bread for the house ghost that everyone pretends not to believe in, but no one quite dares ignore. You remember how, last winter, your little brother left a coin under the floorboards and found it replaced a week later with a tiny, perfect bird's egg. No one knew how it got there, but the house felt warmer that night, as if some invisible guest was pleased. Your grandmother once told you that every hill, every stream, every twisting tree in the forest has a guardian, a spirit who remembers when the world was young and wild. If you disrespect them, they might tangle your hair or sour your milk, or send you wandering in circles until dawn. But if you're polite, if you greet the rocks and thank the streams, they might just leave you in peace, or even bring a little luck. You smile to yourself, thinking of all the times you've greeted the old birch at the edge of the field, just in case, and the way you never step on the stone near the goat pen, because it feels like it's watching. Sometimes, the house itself seems alive, especially on winter nights like this, when the fire glows and the wind howls and every shadow could be something waiting. The beams creak, the thatch shifts, and the darkness seems to move, slow and patient, just beyond the reach of the flame. You tell yourself it's only the wind, only the cold settling in, but some part of you listens for other sounds, footsteps that aren't there, voices that don't quite belong. You remember a story about a night when someone forgot to leave an offering at the door, and the next morning the stew pot was cracked clean through, the milk curdled in its pail, and the chickens laying nothing but eggs with tiny blue dots. Signs, your grandmother insisted, that the house spirits were displeased. You tuck yourself deeper into your furs, trying to keep your feet warm and close your eyes. But the stories won't let you sleep. You think of the midwinter feast coming soon, when the whole house will be cleaned top to bottom, every tool polished, every corner swept, and extra bread set out for any spirit or wanderer who might pass by. You love the way the house glows on those nights, filled with the smell of roasting meat and fresh-baked bread, everyone dressed in their best tunics, the air alive with music and laughter. But there's always a moment when the grown-ups fall silent, when someone tells a story of the old gods, and the shadows seem to lean a little closer, You know then that even the bravest warrior wouldn't dare step outside until morning. As you drift between waking and sleep, you imagine what it would be like to meet a spirit. Would it be frightening or just strange? Would it look like an animal, a person, or something in between? You promise yourself that if you ever see one, you'll be brave, you'll remember your grandmother's words, you'll speak politely and offer bread, and never ever turn your back on the forest. You like to think the spirits might recognize you. 2. A child who listens, who remembers, who knows that not everything in the world can be seen or named. The wind rattles the shutters and you hear your mother's voice. Soft and close. Sleep, little one. The spirits are out tonight, but so are the old gods, and they watch over the brave. You feel her hand on your forehead, warm and gentle, and for a moment the world is simple again. A house in winter, a fire on the hearth, a family huddled close. You let the stories fade to a low hum, letting the mystery of the long northern night wrap around you, not as something to fear, but as something vast. A reminder that your world is full of wonders and watchers, of things seen and unseen, all woven together by belief and hope and the stubborn will. To greet another dawn, with your last waking breath, you whisper a small thanks into the dark. Thanks for warmth, for bread, for the stories that keep the old fears at bay, and let sleep finally carry you into dreams where the gods and spirits wander, where every snowdrift hides a secret, and every gust of wind might just be the passing of something strange and eternal, slipping softly through the endless winter night. Dawn comes slow and uncertain, seeping in through the smoke hole like a shy visitor afraid to wake the sleeping house. The world outside is pale and muffled, the snow rising in soft blue drifts against the longhouse, but inside there is already movement, the gentle clatter of a pot on the hearth, the muted groans of bodies stretching away the stiffness of sleep, the animal breaths and low murmurs that fill the air with life. You are among the first to rise, your stomach already rumbling as you slip from your bedding and cross the chill-packed earth, pulling your tunic close and rubbing the cold from your arms. The fire has burned low, but a few embers still glow in the ash, and your mother is already crouched nearby, coaxing new flames from a twist of birch bark. She glances at you and smiles, a quiet signal that the work of the day must begin again, whether the sun decides to join you or not. The smell of last night's stew lingers, and it stirs your appetite, but breakfast will have to wait. First, there are preparations to be made for the evening meal, a bigger affair than most nights, because tonight the whole family will gather, guests included, to mark the lengthening days and honour the spirits who kept you safe through the coldest part of winter. It's not the full midwinter feast, not yet, but there is a sense of anticipation woven through every task. You feel it in the way your mother sharpens her knife against the whetstone, in the careful way your father counts out the last of the dried peas and smoked fish, in the quiet, almost reverent silence that settles as each person takes up their morning chore. Your first task is to fetch water for cooking. The well lies a short walk away, its mouth shrouded in snow and rimed with ice, and you are bundled up tight against the sharp wind, a wooden bucket in each hand. The path is slippery, the snow packed hard beneath your boots, but you know every twist and dip by heart. You move quickly, breath steaming, eyes narrowed against the sting of the wind, and you pause for a moment to listen. No birds this morning, only the faint creak of trees and the distant call of a raven, black against the pale sky. You remember the stories told around the fire, the way the raven is said to be a messenger of Odin, and you nod in its direction, just in case respect is required. The well is a squat stone ring, its rope stiff with frost, the bucket frozen to the edge where yesterday's water spilled. You pry it loose, muscles aching from the cold, and lower it down, counting heartbeats as you wait for the splash. The water is dark and impossibly cold, and it stings your hands as you haul it up, careful not to spill. Each drop is precious. Winter makes you careful with everything, even the things that seem endless in summer. You make the return trip with both buckets full, your fingers numb but your heart proud, knowing that even this small task is a thread in the fabric that holds the family together. Back inside, the air is thickening with the smells of cooking. Your mother directs you and your cousins with the efficiency of a ship's captain. Chop the roots, sort the dried herbs, scrape the skin from a hunk of smoked pork, portion out the precious last onions from the root cellar. Everyone has a task, from the youngest with their careful hands picking over beans, to the oldest whose knowledge ensures nothing is wasted. There is little talking, only the quiet hum of work and the occasional bark of laughter when someone nicks a finger or drops a carrot into the ashes. Food here is never just food. It is memory, effort and luck, a living record of what the land and sea have given and what you have managed to keep through the cold. The meal will be simple by the standards of kings, but for you it feels like a feast. There will be stew, thickened with barley and flavoured with smoked meat, flatbread, browned on the hearth, pickled root vegetables, their sharpness a counterpoint to the soft richness of the stew, and, as a rare treat, a tiny cake made from dried apples and honey, the last scraped from the bottom of the pot. Each ingredient has a story, the pork traded for wool last autumn, the apples picked in a golden haze at the end of summer, the honey collected from wild hives deep in the forest, the barley threshed and winnowed by every able hand in the house. As you work, the kitchen grows warmer and more crowded. The guests help where they can, your grandmother adding her expert touch to the seasoning, your uncle rolling dough between his huge calloused hands, your little brother tasked with nothing more than staying out of the way, but somehow managing to get flour on his nose. The air fills with laughter and the kind of easy chatter that comes only from people who have survived many winters together. You find yourself humming under your breath, caught up in the rhythm of peeling, chopping, stirring and tasting, always tasting. The hours pass, marked only by the slow arc of sunlight across the wall and the deepening scent of stew on the fire. By mid-afternoon, the preparations are nearly complete. The table, little more than a series of planks across sturdy barrels, is wiped clean, covered with the best cloth in the house, and set with bowls, cups, and wooden spoons. Your mother brings out a few special touches, a carved salt cellar shaped like a whale, a jug of berry mead, a candle stub for each end of the table. The house feels transformed, not grand, but shining in the way that only love and effort can make it. Before the meal, there are still things to be done. You help your cousin carry firewood inside, stacking it neatly by the hearth. You sweep the floor, scatter fresh straw where it will be trampled flat by the end of the night, and check the animals one last time, making sure the goats have hay and the chickens enough grain to last until morning. Your father takes a moment to stand outside, his face turned to the setting sun, and you see his lips move in silent thanks to the land, to the ancestors, to the gods. He catches your eye and gestures for you to join him, and together you breathe the cold air, letting it sting your cheeks and clear your head. Finally, as darkness folds in, the family gathers. The fire is stoked high, the table filled, and everyone finds their place, from the oldest grandmother to the smallest cousin. There is a moment of quiet as your father raises his cup and offers a toast to health, to warmth, to another day survived, and then the meal begins in earnest. You eat with both hands, spooning stew into your mouth, tearing bread, laughing as your uncle tells a story about a dog who once chased a seal all the way into the sea. The guests add their own tales, the conversation swirling from memory to hope to gentle teasing, the house filled with a light and heat that feels stronger than fire alone. After the meal, the grown-ups linger, sipping mead and picking over the last crumbs, while you and your cousins sneak slices of apple cake and plot the next day's games. Someone starts to sing, an old song that rises and falls like the wind, and soon everyone joins in, voices weaving together in a sound as rich and comforting as the stew. For a moment, the winter seems very far away, and you feel as if you could stay like this forever, safe in the glow of food, family, and story. As the evening deepens, you help clear the table, scrape the bowls clean, and carry the scraps outside to leave for the spirits and the wild things that live beyond the firelight. You stand for a moment in the hush, watching your breath curl up into the night, and you think of all the days and nights to come, of feasts and fasts, storms and sunlight, hunger and plenty. You know that each meal, each shared loaf and cup, is a promise made and kept, that you will remember, you will help, you will endure. When you return inside, the fire is burning low, but the warmth of the meal lingers, a soft ache in your belly and your heart. You settle in beside your little brother, wrapping him close as sleep creeps in again, and you listen to the last quiet voices, the stories that will carry you through the night. And as your eyes drift shut, you feel certain of one thing. In this world of snow and darkness, the work you do, the food you share, the hands that shape each day, these are the things that will see you safely through the winter and into the promise of spring. The wind wakes you before the sun. It begins as a faint whistling, rising and falling in mournful gusts just outside the thick turf walls, then swells into a voice of its own, howling, rattling, shaking the longhouse with a power that makes you understand, deep in your bones, why your ancestors called this land harsh and holy. For a few long minutes you lie still, wrapped tightly in your fur blanket, listening as the storm claws at the roof, testing for weakness, searching for a way in. Each plank and beam creaks in protest, the turf overhead rustling as if a herd of restless spirits is pacing above you. The smoke hole, usually so docile, spits tiny flakes of snow into the air, cold dots on your cheeks and forehead. You squeeze your eyes shut, telling yourself the house has stood through worse storms than this, that you are safe here among your people, but there is a small, wild part of your heart that wonders what would happen if the wind were just a little stronger, the night just a little colder. You are not the only one awake. In the shadows you see your mother rise, pulling her shawl close around her shoulders, moving quietly from bed to bed to check that the youngest children are covered, the oldest still sleeping. She moves to the animal end of the house, whispering to the goats, whose nervous bleats rise in chorus every time a fresh gust of wind pounds against the door. You hear her soft words, soothing, familiar, the same things she used to say to you when you were even smaller than you are now. Your father is at the main door, leaning his weight against it with a practiced care, checking the latch and the big wooden beam that bars it from the inside. He glances over at you, catches your eye, and nods. In that brief look, you sense both reassurance and warning. Storms like these are no time for carelessness or wandering curiosity. The longhouse feels even smaller during a storm. The fire is banked higher than usual, logs added with a frequency that would be reckless on an ordinary day. But today is not ordinary. The cold is a living thing outside, pressing, probing, searching for chinks in the walls. Smoke from the fire twists in the air, sometimes swirling down into your lungs and making you cough, sometimes rising in a clean stream through the hole above. You rub your eyes, blinking away tears, and move closer to the hearth, seeking not just warmth, but the comfort of company. Your grandmother is already there, stoking the embers with her iron poker, muttering under her breath a litany of blessings. Words so old they might belong to the wind itself. You know, as everyone does, that a winter storm is not just a test of your house, but of your spirit. The adults try to keep busy. Your uncle checks the roof from inside, prodding the turf, listening for the subtle differences in sound that signal trouble. Your mother melts snow in a big iron pot to make up for water that can't be fetched from the well until the wind dies down. The children are set to quiet tasks, carding wool, braiding twine, telling stories to the youngest so they do not grow afraid. But the mood is tense, every laugh a little too loud, every movement just a touch more hurried, as if by working fast you could outpace the storm. Mid-morning, a loud bang shudders through the house, a shutter blown loose, slamming against the wall. Your father and uncle move as one, grabbing their cloaks and braving the porch, wrestling the heavy wooden panel back into place, their faces set and serious. Snow bursts in around them, stinging your skin, and for a moment you see the world outside transformed, the yard invisible beneath tumbling drifts, trees bent almost double, the sky a swirling chaos of white and grey. The door is slammed and barred again, and the men stamp the snow from their boots, their hair and beards dusted with frost. They grin at you, fierce and wild, their eyes shining with the exhilaration of having bested the wind. At least for now. Afterward, the longhouse gathers together, everyone huddled close to the fire, sharing what warmth and reassurance they can. Someone starts a story, a tale of a boy who once got lost in a storm, found his way home by following the howls of wolves, who it turns out were his ancestors in disguise, guiding him to safety. The younger children listen with rapt attention, their eyes wide, clinging to every word. You realise, suddenly, that stories are not just a way to pass the time. They are a shield, a way to remind yourselves of what endures even when the world seems to be coming undone outside your walls. For lunch, there is a simple meal, stew ladled out into bowls, flatbread passed hand to hand, cheese cut into careful slices so it will last. The food tastes even better in a storm, every bite a small triumph over the wildness just beyond the door. Your mother sits beside you, her arm a solid weight around your shoulders, and you lean into her warmth, letting the sound of her voice and the soft clatter of spoons drown out the howling wind. There are jokes, too, a story about a goat who once tried to fly in a gale, another about a man whose beard froze so stiff he used it as a rake. Each laugh pushes the fear back a little further, until you almost forget there is anything to fear at all. But the storm is not easily ignored. Midway through the day, the fire sputters, smoke pouring sideways into the room as a downdraft pushes through the chimney. Your grandmother curses softly, prodding the logs, and your father crouches low to the ground, feeling for cold spots along the wall. Everyone moves quickly, furs are draped over windows, cracks stuffed with rags and moss, extra blankets fetched for those who shiver most. You help as best you can, holding a lamp while your uncle patches a loose plank, carrying a bucket of hot water from the hearth to melt the ice that started to creep across the inside of the door. Each task is a way of fighting back, of saying, not today, not here. Late in the afternoon, the storm hits its peak. The roof rattles so hard you fear it might fly off entirely. The animals huddle together, their sounds muted and anxious, and your little brother starts to cry, scared by the noise. Your mother gathers you both into her lap, singing softly, an old lullaby about the sun's return, about the patience needed to see winter through. You let your eyes drift closed for a moment, picturing the world outside as a churning sea of snow, your house a sturdy ship riding out the waves. In the song there is hope, a promise that every storm will end, that the sun will rise, that the world will be green again, someday. As dusk approaches, the wind finally begins to ease. The gusts become less frequent, the rattling subsides, and the house seems to breathe a little easier. Someone dares to open the door just a crack, peering out into a world remade, snowdrifts taller than a man, the yard swept clean by the wind, trees glittering with ice in the faint orange glow of sunset. There is a moment of quiet awe as everyone takes it in, the aftermath of chaos, the strange, beautiful silence that follows. You feel a surge of pride, not just in your house but in your family, in your people, who have weathered one more test and come through together. That night, dinner is a little richer than usual, a way of celebrating survival. Your father brings out a jar of pickled fish, your mother slices the last of the good bread, and your grandmother sprinkles dried herbs into the stew. The talk is softer, gentler, filled with gratitude for warmth and shelter, for strong walls and stronger arms. You look around the fire and realize how lucky you are, not just to have food and heat, but to have each other, to have a home that stands and a family that endures. Later, as you drift towards sleep, you listen to the wind fading into the distance, replaced by the soft breathing of those around you. You think of the stories told, the hands that worked to keep you safe, the laughter that pushed back the dark. You understand now, in a way you never did before, that storms will always come, but they will always pass too, and that in their wake, what matters most are the bonds that hold you fast, the courage to face the wildness, and the warmth of the fire at your back. The storm has left the world outside muffled and new, a landscape sculpted by wind and snow and the strange sharp clarity that follows chaos. You wake to the hush of a morning so still that even your breath seems loud in the cold air, the memory of last night's rattling wind lingering only in the odd creak of the beams and the faint whistle that slips through the smoke hole. The longhouse is slow to stir, everyone wrapped deep in their furs, savouring the peace after so much tension. But gradually, life returns, the animals shuffle and snort, your father rises to prod the fire into a fresh blaze, your mother checks the roof for leaks and drafts, running her hand along the timbers with a frown that relaxes when nothing gives way. The sun is a weak coin behind the clouds, its light barely more than a suggestion, but inside, the glow of the hearth is a promise that the worst has passed. This day, more than most, is a gift. Chores are lighter, the work broken into smaller pieces, as if everyone agrees that a storm deserves a day of rest in its wake. The animals are checked and fed, the water buckets refilled, the floor swept clear of stray ash and straw, but then, instead of being sent outside for firewood or to break trails through the drifts, you find yourself gathered with your siblings and cousins around the fire, hands empty, faces flushed, the weight of responsibility briefly lifted. Even the adults are less hurried. Your father sits with a mug of warm ale. Your mother sets aside her spindle. Your grandmother pulls out the big bag of riddlestones, and your uncle slumps down with a grin, stretching his long legs toward the flames. There is something about the aftermath of a storm that invites laughter. Maybe it's relief, maybe it's exhaustion, maybe it's the knowledge that for one day at least, there is nothing more to do but enjoy the company you keep. It begins with a game, a simple one, tossing bones or small carved sticks into a circle drawn on the dirt floor, betting scraps of yarn or pebbles, or the honour of fetching the next log for the fire. You and your cousins dive into the contest, voices loud and teasing, every throw an occasion for boasting or groaning, every victory met with cheers that rattle the pottery on the shelves. Someone starts telling riddles, old favourites and new inventions, some clever, some ridiculous, each one met with groans and laughter, even from the grown-ups who claim to have heard them all before. Your grandmother proves herself a riddle master, her eyes twinkling as she stumps everyone with one about the thing that eats but never tastes, drinks but never thirsts, always running but never tires. You think hard, mouth twisted in concentration, and finally guess, the river. She cackles with delight, tossing you a dried berry in reward. Your uncle tells a story about a fox who once outwitted an entire family of hunters by hiding in plain sight, and your father insists that when he was a boy, he once tricked a bear into sharing its den for a night. An obvious lie, but a good one, and it sets off another round of stories, each taller than the last. The games change with the mood. 1 minute you are arm wrestling your cousin on the rough boards of the sleeping bench. The next you are trying to see who can whistle the loudest, or recite the old rune rose the fastest. The laughter is so strong, so contagious, that even your littlest brother, barely awake, is soon giggling in a heap of blankets, his hair sticking out in wild tufts. You tease him gently, remembering how, not so long ago, you were the smallest in the house, the one always left behind during the real work. Now you feel bigger, stronger, almost grown, and for a moment you imagine yourself as the head of the house someday, leading your own family through storms and feast days, telling stories by the fire, making the little ones laugh. As the day wears on, the longhouse takes on the easy air of celebration. Someone finds a hidden store of hazelnuts and cracks them open, sharing the bounty with sticky fingers and happy grins. Your mother brings out a piece of cheese saved from the last trade, just a sliver for everyone, but sharp and delicious, a taste of summer in the heart of winter. Your grandmother insists on another round of riddles, and the room is filled with the sound of voices, the pop and crackle of the fire, the steady, contented breaths of the animals at the far end of the hall. You feel, for the first time in days, truly light, as if the storm has not only passed, but somehow washed the world clean, leaving only the bright threads of kinship and comfort behind. The grown-ups join in the games, your father besting your uncle at a contest of strength, your mother trouncing your eldest cousin in a round of knucklebone toss, your grandmother making everyone roar with laughter as she pretends to forget the rules and invents her own. There are old songs sung, some silly, some sad, all of them known by heart. You raise your voice with the others, letting the melody rise and fall, imagining it drifting out into the white world, a beacon of warmth and hope to any who might be lost in the snow. As night falls, the laughter softens into quiet talk. You sit with your siblings and cousins, legs tangled, sharing secrets and plans for the coming spring, what you'll plant in the first thaw, where you'll explore when the world is green again, how you'll make new games, and maybe, if you're lucky, spot one of the spirits or hidden folk you've all whispered about in the dark. The fire burns low, and you feel sleep tugging at your eyes, but you fight it, wanting to savour every moment of this rare, golden peace. Before bed, your father gathers everyone together, lifting his mug in a toast, to storm survived, to laughter found, to family close and strong. The adults echo him, and you all clink mugs, cups, even spoons together, a chorus of clatter and cheer that fills the house from end to end. Your mother kisses your forehead as you crawl into your furs, and you pull your little brother close, tucking him in, promising to keep him safe until morning. Lying there, you listen to the fading sounds, the soft murmurs of the grown-ups, the slow breaths of your family, the low contented noises of the animals, and you realize that this, more than any feast or victory, is the treasure winter gives you, the bond of shared hardship, the simple joy of play, the knowledge that together you can weather anything. Your eyes grow heavy, your heart is full, and as sleep claims you, you dream of spring, of sun, of green fields and clear streams, knowing that when you wake, laughter and love will be waiting, as steady and sure as the fire that guards your dreams. Night settles in quietly, the world beyond the longhouse swallowed in deep blue darkness, broken only by the soft gold glow of the dying fire and the scattered flicker of tallow lamps set on shelves and beams. You feel the weight of the day on your body, a slow, pleasant heaviness in your limbs, the afterglow of laughter, food, and the company of family warming you even as the temperature dips lower. The hush that falls is gentler than the silence of the storm. It is the deep, sacred quiet that belongs only to winter nights, the kind that makes you acutely aware of your own breath, of every shift and sigh in the beds around you, of the heartbeat of the house itself. For a little while, you and your siblings whisper stories and secrets, recalling favourite jokes from the afternoon, inventing wild plans for the days when the snow finally recedes. But the effort of wakefulness becomes too much to hold. Little by little, one after another, your family drifts towards sleep, the day's noise and motion dissolving into stillness. The animals at the end of the house have already surrendered, their breaths rising in a gentle mist, the soft rustle of straw their lullaby. You nestle deeper under your furs, letting the last warmth of the fire creep into your bones. Around you, the house shifts and settles, wood creaking softly as it expands and contracts in the night cold. For a long moment you simply listen, to your little brother's gentle snore, to the faint hum of your mother's song still echoing in your memory, to the strange hush that always lingers after laughter. You think of all that has filled this day and the days before, the storm that rattled your roof and your courage, the meals made from careful planning and clever hands, the chores shared by every member of the household, the games and riddles, the firelight stories about spirits and gods. The weight of it is not a burden, but a comfort, an anchor that keeps you steady while the wind moves restlessly outside, reshaping the drifts and whispering old secrets around the eaves. You are not afraid of the dark, not tonight. The shadows that crowd the corners of the longhouse feel familiar, not menacing. Maybe you are growing up, or maybe you have simply come to trust in the power of these walls, these people, this stubborn circle of warmth and will. You trace the shapes of your family with your thoughts, your father's steady hands, your mother's quick smile, your grandmother's low, rolling laughter, your cousin's bright eyes. Each of them has been part of your day, your defence against the hunger and the cold and the thousand little unknowns that slip into every northern winter. You feel them even now, each presence like a stone in the foundation of the house, unmoving, essential, and as close as the sound of your own heartbeat. Outside, the sky is clear for the first time in days, and through a gap in the thatch above, you catch a glimpse of stars scattered thick across the velvet dark. You remember your grandfather's words, that the stars are the campfires of old gods and lost ancestors, burning in the heavens to light the way for travellers and dreamers. You wonder where those travellers are tonight, what stories are being told around other fires in other valleys, what children might be listening for the same soft notes of comfort in the night. For a moment, your mind drifts, imagining yourself on a ship at sea, rocked by waves under those same stars, or walking a silent forest path where the snow glows blue beneath the moon and the breath of the world is all around you. Drowsiness washes over you, slow and irresistible, blurring the line between thought and dream. You hear your mother's voice again, low and gentle, telling you that winter is the time when families grow closest, when stories are spun and memories are made to last through all the green days ahead. You think of the little gifts and treasures tucked into nooks and pouches, a carved wooden horse, a smooth pebble from the river, a single bright bead traded for wool, each one a token of care, a thread in the fabric that binds you here. Even the animals seem to know this, pressing close in their sleep, content in the heat that spills from the hearth. The last embers of the fire pulse and fade, throwing shifting patterns of light on the beams and the familiar faces around you. You feel yourself letting go of the day, of the tasks and the laughter, the feasts and the fears. Your muscles loosen, your breath deepens, your eyes slide closed. The house is still, but not empty. It is full of the echoes of every voice, every song, every promise whispered into the dark. You sense the presence of all the winters past, all the children who have ever listened to stories in this same room, all the hands that have kindled the fire and kept the cold at bay. It is as if you are floating in a sea of memory, buoyed by the weight of all that has come before you. Your mind drifts, now to dreams, of green fields and bright water, of running games played in new grass, of the taste of berries warm from the sun, of the clatter of hooves and the laughter of voices outside in the long, endless light of summer. You know these days will come again, that winter will lose its grip and the world will awaken. Until then, you have this, a warm bed, a gentle hand on your shoulder, the steady promise of another morning. Let yourself breathe deeper, slower, softer. Feel the quiet settle into your bones. The wind outside is a lullaby. The stars above are watching, and the house is holding you close. Whatever waits in the world beyond, storms or sunlight, hunger or harvest, work or wonder, you are ready, because you are not alone. The last thing you sense before sleep takes you is the warmth of the fire, the nearness of your family, and the peaceful certainty that in this small bright circle you belong. The hours pass quietly, and you drift further from wakefulness, the worries of the day dissolving, your mind floating somewhere safe and gentle. You see again the faces of those you love, the gentle rise and fall of the hearth fire, the sheltering walls, the soft weight of furs. Let the world fade now, the snow outside piling higher, the stars wheeling slow and bright overhead. Let your breath match the slow heartbeat of the house, and allow every muscle, every thought, every care to melt away. Soon, morning will come, and with it, the pale light, the chores, the laughter, the games, the long, shared work of living. But for now, you are carried gently through the night, the warmth of your people wrapped around you, the dark filled only with dreams and the distant song of winter wind. Sleep, child of the north. You are safe, you are loved, and in this moment all is well.